Hello, my AP US history friends. I hope everybody is doing well. So, as I had mentioned in class, for those of you that were here, since we do have SATs going on, people are traveling for sports, people are out, it seems like a decent amount. In the next coming weeks, I'm going to record some review sessions after each class. Today's going to follow along with notes that we did in class, so I'll hit you with the star exclamation points, the things you really do need to know. So the slides you're going to be looking at on Schoology to follow along are the post-World War II America slides. So we'll start out with the key concepts. These are the big ideas, the big framework for Unit 8. Unit 8 runs from the end of World War II in 1945 to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. That is going to be the biggest theme of Unit 8, is the relationship between the United States and the USSR. In class / in general, you'll hear me refer to them as the Soviet Union, the Soviets, the USSR, or the Russians. I'm pretty much using them interchangeably. Even though Russia is a country in the Soviet Union, it's not the entire thing. They do control it, so I may use Russia interchangeably, but it all means the same thing. So competition between the U.S. and the Soviet Union in politics, technology, and economics to try to control the world and world domination. Nuclear bombs are going to be a very big piece of this, as are what are known as proxy wars, which are wars fought between two countries that aren't actually directly fought between them. So Korea, the war in Korea is an example of this, the war in Vietnam, and the Soviet-Afghan war are all examples of this. We'll eventually get there. Another big key concept for Unit 8 is the limitation of civil liberties, specifically looking at the civil rights movement and communism, Red Scare, and how that limits civil liberties. The rise of mass culture and then the counterculture that follows that. So a lot of collective thinking, a lot of popular culture rising up through the 50s and 60s, and then the reaction to that culture is like the beatniks and the hippies and the counterculture movements that go along with those. And then lastly, the continued power gains of the federal government in controlling the economy and political control. We'll also see the rise of modern conservatism and something called Reaganomics, which is basically modern conservative economic policy, rises up in this time period as well. Moving along through the slides, we'll go to how do you get back to normal? You can't. The nuclear bomb is a pivot point for world history. Never before have we been able to have the power of humanity to destroy the entire world. I mean, natural events, asteroids, volcanoes, that sort of stuff has always existed. But the idea that the countries themselves, people themselves, could destroy the planet is a new concept, and it has a massive effect on everything. It actually, I would argue, prevents more wars than it actually causes. The threat of a nuclear bomb being dropped on the United States or the Soviet Union is definitely the reason why they never actually fought a war against each other. So nuclear bombs have a massive ramification on geopolitics as a whole, but also on like the mindset, specifically of like the 50s, 60s, and 70s kids of the American generation, where they're going to live under constant fear of the bomb, which leads to a lot of their cultural aspects. The United States does take advantage of the post-World War II situation. Europe is in complete shambles at this point. It's completely destroyed. So is a lot of Asia. So basically from the middle of Russia all the way to Portugal, and then, China all the way down through Southeast Asia, even down into like the Philippines, is pretty much destroyed. The only country that's untouched by World War II other than Pearl Harbor is the United States. So we have factories ready to go to manufacture things. We have schools ready to educate the next generation. We have hospitals advancing technology and medical treatment. And we're going to invest heavily in the sciences to continue to grow not only military weapons, but modern technology as well. So the United States comes out with a huge advantage in the fact that they are not destroyed. The problem is, since other countries are destroyed, we don't have trading partners. So if you look at like the post-World War II economy for the first 5 years or so, 1945 to 1950, there is not a big boom. The boom doesn't really happen until the 50s because other countries need to rebuild first before we have trading partners. We're going to help them rebuild in something called the Marshall Plan, which is, the next slide on here. We're looking at it. The Marshall Plan gets a ! Exclamation point. It is super critically important for understanding how the U.S. gains power and friends in the world. Essentially, we're going to pay to rebuild the countries affected by World War II, including the Soviet Union. We offer them money. They say no, but the idea that we offer them money shows that hey, if they had taken that money, then capitalism is better than communism. They need help rebuilding. They're admitting that fact, and now it's propaganda. Or no, they don't take it, which they didn't, and they're going to continue to struggle as a country. Both are great for the United States. But the reason why we do the Marshall Plan is for a multitude of reasons. One, we're now the world's power, so you want to set the idea, the precedent that superpowers in the world are going to act ethically towards one another. So that's probably the flimsiest argument, but it is this idea that the U.S. is acting morally good in this. We also need trading partners, which is pretty selfish, but yeah, we do need people to develop again, so we have people to trade with. And then lastly, we're buying allies, because as you can see in the picture, for European recovery supplied by the United States of America, we're putting that on everything we're rebuilding in Europe. So if those countries want to go to communism, the people think about becoming communists or joining on the Soviet Union side, all they have to do is look around at their job, their food, their kids' school, their hospital, whatever, and they're like, hey, the U.S. built that back. Capitalism built that. So they're not going to go to the other side. So it does buy us allies. Again, that's the Marshall Plan. It's quite a big deal. The last thing we got into in class was the Iron Curtain speech. Winston Churchill, who was Prime Minister of the UK during the Second World War, is no longer Prime Minister post-World War II, and he goes on a speaking tour of the United States in 1946. And basically what he's trying to argue for is that the United States should intervene in Russia. Russia just lost 27 million people. They do not have a nuclear bomb, and the United States does. So if there were ever a time for any country to go in and invade Russia, which nobody other than the mongrels have done in history before, now would be the time for us to go in, literally take over Moscow and force sort of capitalist democracy. Obviously, we don't do that. Churchill wants us to, but he goes out and he gives a really famous speech about how the United Kingdom and the U.S. have a special relationship with one another, that they need to work together to maintain the world order that they want to have. And that an iron curtain has descended across the continent, shielding, the Russians from the Western world, the capitalist democracy part of the world. First period didn't get into this, but they'll cover it anyway. Second period did, so it's only two more that I'll knock out before we're done here. The Truman Doctrine is going to be U.S. foreign policy. It also gets a star exclamation point. The Truman Doctrine basically says that the U.S. will stop the spread of communism at all costs, hoping that by choking out communism, stopping it from spreading, that it will eventually, die itself out. The U.S. doesn't have to directly fight it. That's our plan. It's called the Truman Doctrine. It gets a star, stopping communism, the spread of communism at all costs. It's what leads to the war in Korea, leads to the war in Vietnam, leads to the U.S. controlling Central and South American countries, leads to our issues with Cuba. The Truman Doctrine has a big role in this. We should definitely know it. And then lastly is the domino theory. It's this idea that if one country falls to communism, the next one will fall to communism, and so on and so forth. Therefore, we need to stop communism in the first place. Anyways, we've got a lot more to go into as we go. The last slide that you look at is just, Joseph Stalin choking on the Truman Doctrine, showing that the Soviet Union is going to struggle with the U.S. trying to stop communism from spreading. But anyways, that's what we went through in class. I hope you have a great day and see some of you on Friday. I will do this again to recap what we've been doing until SATs are done. Later.